we are going to do something about making the impossible happen. And we're going to draw back the curtain and look behind the Iron Dome to learn a little bit about how the impossible takes place in Israel to protect us all. But we're not into the defense side so much as the technology and the fact that it's a business and job creation. And with that, I'd like to invite Gideon Weiss from Rafael to come tell us about Behind the Iron Dome, from David Sling to the Iron Dome, novel innovation. Thank you.
Am I on? This working? Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up, straighten up your back of seats, and get ready to take off. Emergency exits are here, 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 and here. I took upon myself the challenge of entertaining you after lunch. Everybody's falling asleep, so we're going to make this half hour very enthusiastic and interesting to you, hopefully. Two personal facts about myself that will then tie into the presentation. One is that I grew up on a kibbutz, Kibbutz Ein HaShofet. Those of you who know Israel, it's on the northern part of the Jezreel Valley, overlooking the Jezreel Valley. And the second thing is that during my military operation service, I was operating heavy equipment in the Israeli Air Force. We're going to get to that later. Acknowledgements to my dear friend and colleague Hanoch Levine, who was the Iron Dome program manager. All of what you're going to see here, the ingenuity, the innovation, is mostly pertaining to him. He was the real brain and spirit behind that development program. My dear friend Pini Jungman, who is currently the David Sling program manager, and a good friend of mine, Ari Satcher, the senior system manager, engineer at the Iron Dome program currently, and he's a very, very good pioneer in the storytelling of the Iron Dome. Some of you may have heard him in previous sessions. Most of you know this map, but what we tend to forget when we talk about Israel and how difficult it is to protect Israel, to understand in which environment we live. And in this sense, we take the politically correct map of Israel, and we show the size of that, the size of that country, and we put it overlaid on the United States. Or in this sense, we put Jerusalem right over Washington, D.C., and it gives you that perspective of how small our country is and how difficult it is to defend it against a multitude of threats that we have. That being said, we have different types of threats coming in, of different gifts and sizes. Some of them are very small coming out of the Gaza Strip. They're getting bigger. Also small and medium size coming out of Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. We've received a lot of gifts from them. And we also need to worry about the threats from Iran. The threats from Lebanon were only about this coverage in 2006. Basically, the entire southern part of Lebanon was a launch pad, and you can see the dispersion of the threats that came out of there. My house basically is right inside that blue spot in the middle. Right now, their coverage is basically going all the way down to Tel Aviv. In Gaza, again, you see the coverage in the gray area, but they're mostly targeting Beersheba and Ashkelon and Ashdod, which are highly populated areas. You don't need to worry about dispersion. It's going to hit somewhere. It doesn't matter where it is. It's going to hit somewhere. And also the Qassams are aimed at Sderot and Netivot. Rockets are very easily launched, and even something very benign as this gentleman riding his little pony could end up being a rocket launcher. And I'm not kidding you. This is something that we actually see happening. Our enemies are getting smarter, and they're concealing their weapons in very peculiar places, so that it's very difficult to track them down and to discover them on time. And it's more difficult than to, when you hit them, to actually show that it's really an enemy and not a benign truck. Also, these rockets could be launched in salvos, and that means that it's very difficult to detect them, very difficult to track them, and very difficult to intercept them when they're all going on a single city. So you need to develop your system in order to be able to do that. Also, we need to worry about those longer range threats, about UAVs that our enemy has, and about cruise missiles. That being said, I want to show you where we were just 2 months ago.
Watching a really tense situation along the border in the Middle East. It's ramping up. And militants in Gaza releasing this video showing what they claim is a barrage of rocket fire into southern Israel. Israeli aircraft striking right back in response, pounding targets in Gaza. And our Leland Vittert is literally on the front lines in southern Israel with the very latest right near the firing line. Leland, what's going on?
Effective in protecting populated areas. On my right shoulder here is the town of Ashdod, one of the cities that it is protecting. There's about 1 million Israelis in the line of fire, and I can tell you from today's rocket attacks, when these rockets are going off and when you hear those air raid sirens, it is awfully scary. That siren going off means there's a missile headed here into the area we're at. You're looking at the Iron Dome battery. This is the missile defense system that the Israelis have put in, and right now it is tracking the missile coming out of Gaza. Another missile away right there from the Iron Dome. Each one of those interceptors is headed towards one of the some 200 missiles that have come out of Gaza here.
So this is a situation where we were just recently. And when I talk about what I did in the Israeli Air Force, this is the heavy equipment that I had operated. And in the summer of 1982, I was still on the kibbutz, almost graduating my 11th grade. And all of a sudden, we wake up one morning, and we found ourselves almost without men on the kibbutz. Why is that? It's June 5th, the first Lebanon War. It's the first time Israel had to retaliate against a barrage of those rockets coming out of Lebanon. For about a month and a half, that had continued, and we had to stay over in Lebanon up until 2000. Only 9 years later, I found myself patrolling the skies of Israel in 1991, witnessing a very horrific evening of 5 Scud missiles being shot at us from Iraq, 2 out of into Haifa and 3 into Tel Aviv. Remember, we had the Patriot batteries over there, and other than doing a very beautiful display of 4th of July and a lot of explosions, they didn't do a lot of work. Even when they hit those Scuds, they couldn't explode them. So instead of hitting the center of Haifa, they would go a little bit to the left or to the right, but they would still do a lot of damage on the ground. So that was a very difficult situation. Only 15 years afterwards, in 2006, I was 13 years already in an active reserve and flying my F-15 over the skies of Lebanon, again trying to get hold of those rocket launchers. And we were very successful in doing that against the longer range rockets, but not so much against the smaller and shorter range. So we had to find very good solutions to defend ourselves, not only to deter our enemies, but also to really defend our country. And so we Israelis know that we need to fend for ourselves and do it in our own way. So the weapons that we put up against that was the Arrow system, Arrow 1, convergent to Arrow 2. It's already operational a few years, and that is protecting us already against those medium to short-range Scud ballistic missiles that could come in. In development right now under the same US DoD Missile Defense Agency and Israeli Ministry of Defense on the right-hand side, the same composition with IAI as the lead and Rafael giving a bite in that, is the Arrow 3. And that's going to be a longer-range interceptor going to be able to intercept targets that are above the atmosphere, way above the atmosphere in space. So they'll be able to shoot down those targets coming in from Iran. The Iron Dome is our focus of this afternoon's discussion. It's already operational. It's in combat proven, developed by Rafael, solely by Israeli shekels. But we're going to talk about the support that we're getting from America later on. Another system that's in between those is the David's Sling. That system is again developed by Rafael. You can see the partnership again with Israeli Ministry of Defense and the US Missile Defense Agency co-sponsoring that. And there's also another play there called Raytheon, small company out of Tucson, Arizona. This system has an interceptor called Stunner. We'll talk about that shorter afterwards. The multi-layered defense system that Israel is now putting together begins in the lower phase with Iron Dome. Okay, so the Iron Dome will protect us against the shorter range, the Katyushas, the shorter range mortars, all of those, that what it's doing now in the southern part of Israel. There's also an intent to deploy that in the northern part of Israel. To cover the entire state of Israel, what we think is the enemy's targets for these threats is about 16 batteries altogether. Above that, we're going to place the David Sling, and that's going to take care of the longer range targets, the longer range rockets, some of the ballistic missiles, but mostly for UAVs and cruise missiles. It's going to be a unique solution that's going to take care of that. And the U.S. has its eye on that as well. Already in place is the Arrow 2, already protecting us, as I said, against the short and medium range ballistic missiles. And above that, about 2.5 years from now, again, the Arrow 3, protecting us against the exo-atmospheric capability above and in space. The Iron Dome is designed to shoot down artillery rockets to defended areas. And we're going to show you how that works. So if I have a defended area, you see that blue footprint. This is what I want to protect right now. We would deploy our forces. We have the radar, we have the battle management, the communication, and the launchers alongside and into this area. So all of these systems will be communicating with each other, and they will have the radar to pick up the threats. Once it does, there's an early warning, and the next thing that happens, they'll automatically calculate the trajectory. If that trajectory shows that that threat is going to fall inside our footprint, the defended footprint, then we'll start doing the business. The first thing we do is calculate potential trajectories that our interceptors can go in. And as the threat goes up, the interceptor would be launched. See that happen right now? So the interceptor would be launched at the right time. And at the right moment, it will do its maneuver, peel off its shroud. We'll talk about that shroud. And at that time, the interceptor will open up its own eyes, track and lock onto the target, navigate itself, and in the right moment, activate its proximity fuse, and boom, it goes. That's the principle of operation of the Iron Dome. Out of the big list of requirements that we have here, I'm only going to outline two, the two bottom ones. The threat, in order to eliminate a threat, you need to kill the warhead. You need to detonate the warhead. If you hit it and you don't detonate the warhead, you basically did nothing. The second thing is we need to have it affordable. And let's talk about these things. So how difficult it is to actually shoot one down. I've spent enough time in the US to understand that in order to explain things, I need to be very clear. So I'm using football as an example, or baseball for that matter. But remember, you only have to shoot the front end. So you basically need to shoot down a target that is less than one football. Okay? So let's see how that is done. You need to watch carefully.
Everyone watching at home, I want you to check this out. 2 receivers, 2 footballs, 1 choice. Go.
Boom, boom. Okay, we're taking that as an inspiration, and we're going forward. Could I have that door closed, please? Thank you. So what is affordable? Affordable means that Israel cannot afford to shoot down all of those rockets coming in, but it cannot afford to be hit by them. So we need to come up with a system that does two things. One, a very, very sophisticated and good discrimination between those relevant targets that are actually going to hit us, and a combination with a very low-cost interceptor. So in the Iron Dome, we came up with a Tamir interceptor. Very nice name. This is, ladies and gentlemen, the world's lowest cost air defense missile today. The Iron Dome has 3 main objectives, as put together by the Danny Gold, then head of the IMOD. He was the one who actually pushed that to become, with Amir Peres, to start doing the development. It needs to be ethical, it needs to be economical, and it needs to serve as a tool, strategic tool, for policymakers and leaders. And that is something that's not taken for granted, because if you have an alternative course of action that's other than military escalation, you're not only saving your own lives, but you're saving the lives of your enemies. You're avoiding more collateral damage that could be caused with military escalation, and that's very important. Real-life events. Let's look at this. At May of 2008, one Grad missile hits a shopping mall in the city of Ashkelon. 96 people injured, out of which 4 are severely injured. Dozens of millions of dollars in damages. Tremendous, just one rocket. We didn't have a defensive system at the time. A few months later, we had to retaliate. These attacks kept on going and going. We had to retaliate. We had cast lead going. Unfortunately, we lost a dear friend, or not a friend, but I didn't actually know him, Beber Vaknin, from the city of Netivot. And he was at his home, and he shot by one shrapnel that killed him. I know that because on that day I was on duty. And when I finished my duty on that day, I decided that instead of turning home, I would turn my car south, and I'd go to Netivot, and I spend a few hours sitting Shiva with his family and friends. It is a tragic story to see how that actually injures and hurts those people that are out there and in the line of fire. However, in 2012, just 2 months ago, when the Iron Dome system was already in place, over 200 rockets were shot at Israel, and almost 85% of those rockets were shot down, eliminating most of the damages, no major injuries, and most importantly, no military escalation. So that shows that it really served the purpose. How did we do it? When you look at the program milestones in development, testing did not need to wait for development to end. It started in the middle. Production did not need to wait for testing to finish. It started in the middle. And fielding did not wait for the production to end. Everything was in parallel. So you can see that less than 30 months from kickoff, we already had a fielded system that the Israeli Air Force started using, started fielding, started putting in place, and training their people. So on April 7th of 2011, and I remember that very well because it's my mother's 82nd birthday, there was the first interception over the skies of the southern Israel, and from that time on, the Iron Dome is operational and combat proven with the IDF. I'm going to skip this because we used to show a lot of the tests that we had were very, very impressive, but now we have real videos. So let's stick to the real videos. The system is now operational in the southern part of Israel, protecting the area around Beersheba, around Ashdod. These are shots coming from the recent events in March. Look at these soldiers. They're very, very happy and very confident in their system. And I particularly like this one with the shepherd going around in the fields with the battery in the back protecting them. The next video I'm going to show you is real-life images from this March. One evening, this is one event that you're going to see, taken from 3 different people, civilians on the ground in Beersheba. Instead of going to the shelters, they're picking up their cameras and taking videos. They're so confident in the system. So you're going to see, this is a compilation I made of these 3 videos, one night in Beersheba. People are kind of happy now.
Whoa.
This is the Iron Dome Tamir interceptor starting going up. And you can see how many of them going out. This is really a barrage of targets coming in, like the news anchor said.
הנה הפיצוץ. שם את הפיצוץ. הנה עוד אחד. יש כמה באוויר. וואו, תראו. קבלו. וואו, את הפגזות. וואו. היא מלא, זה קוקים. כל הכבוד!
Видишь?
2.
Да. Йоу.
Вот.
That's the second
Киба,
guy.
3-4. 5, нихуя себе.
Йоу.
That's the third guy. These guys are actually right below where these rockets are going to hit if they wouldn't be intercepted. Now they hear the explosions, they're starting to get scared. Okay. Innovation. One of the main innovations was not so much in technology, but the way our program management was led. In every program in this defense system, you always have a schedule to meet, you have performance to meet, you have the non-recurring cost, which is the money that you invest in the development, and you have the recurring cost, which is your interceptor unit cost, if you will. The objectives, however, were two: to meet the schedule and to meet a low-cost interceptor. Why? Because it was clear that despite the discrimination and everything, we need to have a low-cost interceptor. So performance was a consequence of the description of what we needed to do. We actually gave up a lot of the things that we wanted to achieve in performance. However, we got a very, very capable interceptor. And the non-recurring became the basis of the program. So we turned the triangle around, and the non-recurring became the basis of the program. That, to me, looked like a nice Star of David by it. Just a nice picture, though. Some inspiration from nature. Animals molt their skin. Okay, we know that from snakes and from lizards. Missiles eject their shrouds. When you look at the Tamir interceptor, its seeker head is actually rounded on the inside, and it has that tip in order to be able to fly very, very fast towards the target. But when it gets to the target, it needs to open that tip out so that the seeker head can actually see the target and home on to it. So when we illustrate this, what the missile needs to do is open up the shroud, take it away, and have that missile look at the target. Usually, this kind of solution costs dozens and dozens of thousands of dollars. Not the case here. It's a fraction of the cost, and I cannot tell you why and how, but it's one of the newest innovations that we have. Make it happen and make it low cost. Missile science from toys. I love this story because when you look at a missile like this, it would have between 60 to 70 little connectors connecting the wires inside that missile. And every connector like that would cost, it could be around $60 each. So remember, we need to come up with the lowest cost interceptor so every dollar counts. We wanted to get rid of that amount of dollars. It was just connectors. We don't need, that doesn't do anything. So lo and behold, come to the rescue, Buzz Lightyear and Woody. Those of you who are not laughing, you don't know these characters. Shame on you. Spend more time with the kids or your grandchildren, not too late. 3 great movies. So I'm not kidding you. We have connectors, not mill standard. We have connectors from toy manufacturers. Some of them are manufacturers of Toys R Us. We found connectors that each are less than $2. And that eliminates almost the entire amount of money that we had to spend on connectors. Ingenuity, very simple. But surprisingly, these connectors stand up to the military standards that the regular connectors would have had to have. Coming down to the David Sling Stunner missile, I'm going to talk about sensors. Why the Dolphin? You'll realize in a second. In a missile like this, in the Stunner, which is more advanced than the Iron Dome, we would have to have 2 sensors at the same time. Top missile is the Python 5, and it has that transparent dome with a high-resolution infrared camera looking forward and trying to find the threat. And on the bottom, you have a radar-guided missile, the Derby missile. It's an AMRAAM type, and it has a radar. We had a requirement to put these 2 sensors together. How do you do that in a missile that's so tight? Coming back to the Dolphin, we need to get some inspiration. We take the Dolphin's contour, we swivel it around, narrow it down to the size of a missile, and here it is, the Stunner missile. It has a pointy nose with an infrared camera, and on top, we put the radar. You don't believe me? Here's the real missile. Okay, you can see the Raytheon logo on there. We do it collaboratively with Raytheon. Coming back to the second requirement of being economical, we need to discriminate between the good targets and the bad targets. Okay, so we have this one event. You can see the Gaza Strip over there on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side, the bottom left-hand side, is the city of Ashkelon. And what you're seeing there is a power plant and a big reservoir of oil. These are strategic targets. We don't want the enemy to hit them. So in this single event, 4 rockets are launched out of Gaza. 3 are going the right way and are intercepted. 1 is going astray and not being intercepted. Luckily, we have it on tape. Somebody was on the beach taking a picture. The white dot, again, is the Tamir interceptor going after or against the threat. You can see the power plant right over there. And on the left, you can see the oil rig. And boom, it's right on top of that. So imagine what would have happened if this interceptor did not occur. Big damage. Another groundbreaking performance that I would like to share with you, again on tape, is this event that happened over Ashdod. Because this rocket went over to Ashdod, a very long-range rocket from Gaza, going all the way to Ashdod. And that particular Iron Dome battery was stationed basically right below that very, very high trajectory. So what the missile had to do in this event, it had to go up, go backwards, climb back up, and maneuver all the way, and it did a good job. Don't believe me? Let's look at the video. Again, somebody had it on tape. Climbs up, turns backwards. Watch this. This is really going backwards. Good photographer, I'd say. Notice this, it's climbing up and then turning back into the target. Count to 5, see the explosion. Very high altitude. Boom, right there. We need to be very appreciative of the U.S. We need to be very appreciative of the U.S. support that we have received as a country, and not only for the Iron Dome, because the Iron Dome was developed with Israeli shekels, but basically right after Desert Storm, that collaboration had begun between the U.S. DoD, Missile Defense Agency, and the Israeli Ministry of Defense, the Israeli Missile Defense Organization, the IMDO. Arrow 1 converged into Arrow 2, developed by IAI. Then Boeing came in. Rafael has a stake in that. Arrow 2 is now in development. As I said, going to the exo-atmospheric capability. Iron Dome, the David Sling beforehand, just 3 years ago, began its development, again with Raytheon under the same constellation. And the Iron Dome, despite the fact that it has been developed fully with Israeli shekels, it has received $203 million last year, a just release of $70 million about 3 weeks ago, and another $610 million is going to be approved for the next 3 years for the support of the manufacturing. So it's building a lot of missiles, a lot of radars, a lot of battle management systems. It's going to a lot of industries in Israel, not only Rafael, a very important support from the U.S., and hopefully that will also pave the way for this technology to go back into the U.S. because we know that the U.S. need them, but it's not invented here, so difficult to penetrate here. In a system like this, there's also a lot of U.S. involvement, so in this particular one, in the David Sling, you can see the footprint of this program in the United States. To summarize, it's all about people. It's the people in the IMOD, it's the teams in Rafael, it's the engineers in Rafael, but mostly today, it's the IDF warfighters that are operating this system on the ground. And the next video I'm going to show you is really eye-watering. I downloaded it from the Israeli spokesperson's website, and unfortunately they didn't have subtitles in English. So when I was working on the subtitles, I just realized that we are looking at 18 and 19-year-old kids in uniform operating this under the point of impact of those rockets. And they're there, they're telling us, we are here to protect you day and night. Go to the shelters when there's alarm going on. Watch this.
שלום לכל תושבי הדרום, אני סמל ספיר קדמי, לוחמת בכיפת ברזל.
אני אדיר לוי, משדרות, מיירט כיפת ברזל.
אני ליאור דוד, אני פה מיירט בסוללה של כיפת ברזל. ואני גם אשדודי, אז אני מבין מה אתם עוברים, ואני עובר את זה בעצמי בימים האלה.
אנחנו נמצאים כאן כבר כמה שבועות במטרה לשמור עליכם ולהגן עליכם ביום ובלילה.
ובסוף שבוע הזה עבדנו מאוד מאוד קשה, אבל עשינו את זה עם חיוך, עשינו את זה במסירות, במקצות, באחריות, ואני מבטיח לכם שאנחנו לא מתכוונים להתייאש לרגע.
וחייבים לעשות הכל על מנת להגן על תושבי הדרום ועל המדינה שלנו מהירי הרקטי הזה.
אז שתדעו לכם שאנחנו חושבים בקורונה ובקרה, אנחנו חושבים עליכם כל הזמן.
ואני מבטיח לכם שנעשה הכל, 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 על מנת להגן עליכם בצורה הטובה ביותר והיעילה ביותר.
אני מבקש מכם, בנימה אישית, להישאר בבתים ולהיכנס למקלטים מתי שיש את ההצדקה.
אני סומך על כל החברים שלי כאן, אז גם אתם יכולים לישון בשקט.
תהיו רגועים, ואמא רק שתדעי, שתי עירותים שלי בסופש האחרון.
I think all we can say is wow, and a big todah for all of that you do. It's fantastic. Are we proud or what? This is the ultimate in technology out of Israel that we want to see. And thank God the U.S. Congress is buying this job creation, and it allows for all this ingenuity.
Amen.
Amen. Our tax dollars being used very well for the state of Israel. Todah rabah. Gidi, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great. We need to take a picture of you.
Thank you.
Todah, thank you.